I drove 8 hours just to give my daughter her birthday gift, but the moment I walked in, I heard her say, "I hope he crashes." They laughed. So I left the cake and walked away. I just hope he crashes or something and doesn't show up this year. I could barely believe my ears. The words cut through the air like a blade, and they were so cruel, so dismissive that they felt like a slap to the face. I stood at the edge of my daughter's doorstep, my heart racing in my chest, holding on to that cake. The same chocolate cake I had baked for her every birthday since she was a little girl. The same one she had loved as a child. Back when things were simpler. When we were a family. He always ruins everything. Seriously, why does he even bother anymore? That voice. It was Emily's. My Emily. My daughter. The girl I raised with my bare hands. The one I'd stayed up nights for when she was sick. The one I'd given everything to, my time, my money, my love. And yet here she was, standing in her own house, her words like venom. She didn't even know I was standing just outside. Then I heard Mark. Her husband. He was the one who always had an opinion, always telling her what to do. Don't let him in if he shows up. I mean it, Em. It's your birthday. You don't need him guilt-tripping you again. Guilt-tripping? Was that how they saw me now? The man who had driven hours on end, not thinking about my own health, not caring about my heart condition, just so I could show up for my daughter on her birthday? All for a few hours together that I thought would be enough to remind her that I was still here. Still her father. I felt a wave of dizziness hit me, but I fought it back. I was 65 years old. My health wasn't what it used to be. But I loved her. I loved Emily, and I thought maybe if I could just make this one effort, maybe we could fix the distance between us. I hadn't even been invited to dinner, but I figured the cake would be a small way to show her that I was still her dad, that I still cared. But those words from my own daughter, made everything I'd done feel worthless. My hand shook as I set the cake down on the porch swing, its little red ribbon now seeming like some kind of cruel joke. I didn't even knock. I didn't ring the doorbell. I just turned around and walked away. The pain in my chest wasn't just physical. It was deep, aching, and far worse than the heart problems that had been plaguing me for months. I didn't even bother to wipe the tears that started to fall silently down my face. I just walked back to my car and got in. The engine hummed to life, but I couldn't bring myself to turn the wheel right away. I had driven 8 hours. 8 hours of pain, of loneliness, of sacrifice. All to be told in the coldest way possible that I wasn't wanted. That I wasn't even considered worthy of a simple thank you. I sat there in silence for a long time, staring out the windshield. I could have gone home. I could have turned around and gone back to the house I barely knew anymore. But I didn't. Instead, I just sat there, alone in that car, and let the ache settle in my bones. The road stretched out in front of me like a never-ending ribbon, and yet every mile I drove felt heavier than the last. I wasn't even sure why I was still going. The hours seemed to drag on and on. The quiet inside the car was suffocating, broken only by the occasional hum of the engine and the sound of my own heartbeat, thumping in my chest like a warning. I didn't need to look at the clock to know how much time had passed. Hours. That's how long I had driven to get there. 8 hours through rain, through stretches of empty highway, with nothing but my thoughts to keep me company. I should have turned back halfway, honestly. But I didn't. I kept going because, deep down, I kept telling myself that things would be different this time. That Emily would be happy to see me. That maybe we could sit down, eat cake together, and talk about life, like we used to before everything changed. But now, after hearing her words, after hearing Mark's dismissive comments about me, I knew the truth. Things weren't the same anymore. They hadn't been for a long time. As I drove, I couldn't help but think back to the past. Back to when Emily was little, before the distance between us had grown. I used to be the center of her world. I remember the way her eyes would light up when I came home from work. How she'd run to me, arms outstretched, calling, "Daddy, you're home." I remember her birthday parties, how we'd make a big deal out of everything. I would always bake her favorite cakes, pick out the best presents, and take endless pictures. I'd be there for her every step of the way, cheering her on in school plays and sports events. But now I'm nothing more than a checkbook to her. A means to an end. I can't even tell you when it happened. When everything started to change. Was it when Emily went to college and became more independent? Or was it when I retired and didn't have the same busy schedule to keep us connected? Maybe it was when she started her family with Mark. Maybe it was then. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I glanced at the clock on the dashboard, nearly 5 in the evening. I was nowhere near home yet. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the highway. But it wasn't beautiful. It felt hollow. Like everything around me was slowly fading, just like the relationship I once had with my daughter. I had never felt this alone before. In my whole life I had never felt so unimportant. I've always been the strong one, the one who everyone could rely on. But now I didn't even know who I was anymore. The father, the provider, the one who always tried to do his best. It seemed like all of that didn't matter. All my sacrifices, all my years of hard work, all the love I had poured into raising my children. None of it meant anything. My thoughts were interrupted by a sharp pain in my chest. I'd been feeling it for days now, but this time it was different. This time it wasn't just a minor discomfort. My heart pounded erratically, and I felt a pressure in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I clutched the steering wheel tightly, trying to focus. The pain passed after a few moments, but it was enough to remind me that I wasn't getting any younger. I wasn't the man I used to be. And as much as I wanted to believe that things could be fixed with Emily, I wasn't sure how much more I had left in me to keep fighting. I reached for my phone, which was resting on the passenger seat, and dialed her number. Emily's name popped up on the screen, but before I could press call, my thumb froze. I stared at her name, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I couldn't bring myself to call her. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the fear of being rejected again. But for some reason I just couldn't do it. I couldn't make the same effort that I'd made countless times before. I couldn't keep trying to force something that wasn't there anymore. I put the phone back down on the seat and drove in silence for a while longer, the only sound the occasional hum of the tires on the road. The sun was almost gone now, and the darkness began to take over. It was a fitting end to a day that had shattered me. I don't even remember how much time had passed. The miles blurred into each other, the road becoming nothing more than a repetitive blur of asphalt, dotted with the occasional car or truck. The pain in my chest had subsided for the moment, but it lingered in the back of my mind, like an unwelcome visitor. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Not right now. The hurt, the sense of betrayal, those feelings weighed on me far more than my physical health at that moment. The silence in the car was unbearable, but I couldn't bring myself to turn on the radio. There was no music that could drown out the thoughts in my head. No song that could wash away the sting of my daughter's words, or the image of her standing there, laughing with her husband, unaware of how badly she had hurt me. I tried to focus on the road ahead. The headlights of passing cars briefly illuminated the stretch of highway, and I watched the lines blur as the night deepened. The more I thought about it, the harder it became to breathe, and not just because of the tightness in my chest. I was suffocating under the weight of it all, of being so invisible to my own children. It wasn't just Emily. It was all of them. My youngest daughter, Emily, lived across the country now. She had her own family, and while we'd always been close, over the past few years she'd grown distant too. At first I didn't think much of it. She was busy with her kids, her job, life got in the way. But as the months went on, her calls became less frequent. I started noticing that my calls to her were going straight to voicemail. At first I thought maybe she was just caught up in life. I'd never pressured her. Emily had always been the more independent one. But when I tried to ask her how things were going, when I tried to make plans to visit, her responses became more and more vague. And it hurt. It hurt because I knew deep down that she was pulling away too. And I couldn't help but wonder if it was me, if I was the reason they were all slowly drifting away. Was I too much of a burden? Was I asking too much of them just by wanting to be a part of their lives? Was I holding on too tight when they were trying to live their own lives? And then there was Mark, Emily's husband. When I first met him, I tried my best to be welcoming. He was a good guy, smart, ambitious, a little brash sometimes, but who wasn't? I figured that he was the one Emily needed, the one who could take care of her the way I could no longer. I thought maybe that would be the change she needed, the person who would make her happy. I tried not to worry too much about how things would change after they got married. That's what happens, right? Kids grow up, get married, start families of their own. I understood that. But Mark? He never really cared for me. Or at least it felt that way. Every time we spoke he was polite enough, but there was always a sense of distance. He'd make little comments about how much he'd saved Emily from my guilt trips, or how independent she was now, as if I had somehow held her back in the past. It was subtle, but over time, it became clear that he didn't want me around. And what did that make me? Just a relic of the past? Another burden he had to deal with when Emily's guilt got the better of her? As I drove through the night, I couldn't stop thinking about how things had gotten to this point. What happened to the family I used to know? What happened to the love, the closeness, the support? I'm not an unreasonable man. I know kids grow up and move on with their lives. I get that. I knew Emily would find her own way, and I was proud of her for that. But this felt different. It felt like I was no longer needed. Not in any way that mattered. I thought about how they all used me, how they only called me when they needed something, when they had no one else to turn to. And what did I get in return? Nothing but a hollow silence when I needed them the most. I'd always been there for them. For all of them. But the more I gave, the less I got in return. The pain in my chest came back again. It was stronger this time, sharper. The pressure seemed to radiate through my rib cage, and I could feel my breathing becoming more difficult. I fought it back, gripping the steering wheel tighter, focusing on the road. The night seemed endless, stretching out into the darkness. I glanced at my phone again, thinking about Sarah. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks, but I still had her number saved. I considered calling her, telling her what had happened with Emily, how much it hurt, but I couldn't bring myself to. Maybe I was afraid she'd say the same thing Emily had. Maybe she'd tell me to stop guilt-tripping her too. I couldn't handle that right now. And then there was Jack, my oldest son. I hadn't heard from him in months. He was always busy with his job, his family, but we used to be close. I used to be able to talk to him about anything. But now, I was lucky if he remembered to send a text on Father's Day or my birthday. The few times we had spoken, it was about his work or how everything was great on his end. But there was no real connection. No real effort. It was clear now as I sat there watching the miles slip by in the darkness, that I was alone. Not just physically but emotionally. I wasn't the man I used to be. I wasn't the dad I thought I was. I had become a distant figure in their lives. A man they turned to when they needed something, but only when it was convenient. The loneliness in that car, in that moment, felt suffocating. I could feel my hands trembling again, and I knew that the road I was traveling on, both physically and emotionally, was leading me to a place I didn't want to go. But there was nothing I could do. I had already given everything I had. As the hours dragged on, I couldn't help but replay the memories in my mind. I thought back to all the times I had tried to make Emily's life easier, all the sacrifices I had made in the hopes of seeing her happy, seeing her succeed. Yet, no matter what I did, it never seemed to be enough. When Emily was younger, I gave everything I had to provide for her. I worked long hours, sometimes leaving before the sun came up and not coming back until well after dark. I didn't mind the work. I had always been a proud provider. Every paycheck I made sure she had what she needed, new clothes, school supplies, everything. But as she grew older, the stakes got higher. College tuition. The wedding. When she got married, I had made sure she had the best of everything. I remember handing over the check for her wedding, the one that covered most of the costs of her dream ceremony. I had saved for months, putting aside what little I could, to make sure her special day was perfect. It wasn't just about money. It was the sacrifices I made to ensure she didn't have to worry about anything. I sold my old truck, the one I had owned for years, to pay for a part of her wedding. That truck was a piece of me, a reminder of everything I had worked for. But I didn't hesitate. Emily was my daughter. Of course, I would do anything for her. I remember how she beamed that day, her face glowing as she walked down the aisle. Mark, her new husband, was standing at the altar waiting for her, and I could feel the pride in my chest. I thought to myself, this is what I worked for. To see her happy, to see her taken care of. But it didn't stop there. No, my sacrifices didn't end with her wedding. I continued to do whatever I could to support her, to help her and Mark build their life together. They needed a new home and I had just the savings to make it happen. The house they wanted was beyond their budget, so I lent them money, a lot of money. I didn't even think twice. I wired the funds to Mark's account without hesitation. I told myself it was for Emily, that she deserved it. She had been through a lot, and I wanted her to have a life she could enjoy without worrying about the small things. But even after that, I wasn't done. The gifts, oh, the gifts I bought them. I thought I was showing them how much I cared, how much they meant to me. I bought Emily expensive jewelry, something I knew she'd never buy herself. A diamond necklace, earrings, and bracelets. And for Mark, I bought him a brand new SUV. I figured he's family now. He's taking care of my daughter, and he deserves it. And what did I get in return? Silence. No thank you. No acknowledgement. Not a single thank you note for the gifts, the money, the years of hard work I'd poured into giving them everything I could. It was as if my sacrifices didn't even register. I wasn't doing it for the recognition, but the lack of it hurt nonetheless. It made me feel like I was invisible, like I didn't matter, like I was just a walking bank account to them. I didn't mind helping them, at least I didn't think I did. I wanted to see my family comfortable, happy, successful. But I started to wonder when I became just a resource. When did I stop being a father? A father they could lean on but not depend on in every aspect of their lives? The worst part was when Mark came to me for help with his finances. He was struggling with some debts and he asked me for a loan. It wasn't a small amount either. It was thousands of dollars. I didn't hesitate, of course. I gave it to him without a second thought, just like I had given Emily money when she needed it. But after that, nothing. The money was paid back in bits and pieces over the months, but no words of gratitude were spoken. No recognition of the sacrifices I had made for them. The way they took advantage of me, my resources, my generosity, did it ever matter to them? Did they even care? Or was I just some ATM, a convenient way to solve their problems? I didn't want to believe that. I didn't want to think that my own daughter and her husband viewed me like that. But the truth was staring me in the face every time I walked into that house and saw them so busy with their own lives. I was just an afterthought. I had given so much. Too much perhaps. And yet, every time I needed them it was the same story. They were too busy. Too preoccupied. Too distracted. The calls became less frequent. The visits became fewer. And so I kept giving. Giving in silence. Watching them take and take without so much as a thank you. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just giving because I wanted to help. I was giving because I wanted them to love me. I wanted to feel like I mattered to them. But every sacrifice, every dollar spent, every gift handed over, it was all just a reminder of how little they actually needed me. They didn't need my presence, not really. They needed my resources, my ability to make things easier for them. And it hurt. As I drove through the night, thinking about all of it, I couldn't stop the tears from welling up in my eyes. I was ashamed, not of giving them everything I could, but of how much I had been willing to lose in the process. I had lost myself. I had given so much of myself to them, and in return, I had nothing left. No one to turn to. No one to care. That birthday cake I had brought with me, the one I was about to hand over to Emily as if it would somehow fix everything, it felt like nothing more than an offering of a desperate man trying to win back the love he had lost. But I didn't need to bring a cake. I didn't need to give anything else. What I needed most was recognition, not just for the things I had done for them but for who I was. A father. A man who had spent his life doing everything he could to make sure his family was happy. But all I got in return was silence, indifference, and now, rejection. The pain in my chest tightened once again. This time it felt different. This wasn't just the physical discomfort I had been trying to ignore. This was a pain deeper than anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just my heart that was hurting, it was my soul. The pain in my chest had returned with a vengeance. It wasn't just physical anymore, it was a knot of emotions tangled up inside me, tightening with every mile I drove. I kept my hands firmly on the steering wheel, trying to focus on the road, but my thoughts were miles ahead, swirling in a vortex of confusion, hurt, and helplessness. I couldn't believe what had just happened. What Emily had said, that cutting remark, stung more than anything. I thought back to how her words had echoed in my mind as I stood there in her house, holding the birthday cake, a symbol of everything I had hoped to give her. Love, attention, effort, sacrifice. And she had rejected it. No, not just rejected it, wished me harm. I hope he crashes, she had said, laughing with her husband, completely unaware of the pain I was in. It wasn't even a whisper, it was out in the open as if I wasn't even there. The moment those words left her mouth, something inside me snapped. For the first time in years I felt a clarity that shook me to my core. I wasn't just an invisible man in their lives, I was an outsider. A burden they had to carry rather than a father they could lean on. I had tried for so long to be the father they wanted, the one they needed. I had sacrificed everything, my time, my money, my comfort, my very dignity, just to make sure they never went without. But what did I get in return? Not even a shred of gratitude. No recognition. No appreciation. It was as if all my efforts had been for nothing. The drive was supposed to be a gesture of love, a birthday gift, a simple thing that would show Emily that, no matter the distance between us, I cared. But all it did was reveal just how far gone our relationship had become. How much they had taken me for granted. I wasn't a father anymore, I was just the ATM they used when they needed something. I tried to tell myself that it wasn't that bad. I thought back to the years I spent with them, how much they had meant to me, how much I had done for them. There had to be some good in it, right? But as the miles continued to pass beneath my tires, I couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of emptiness. The love I had given them felt like it had been thrown into the wind, scattered and lost, and I couldn't find it again. I kept telling myself that maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe Emily didn't understand the impact of her words. But deep down I knew the truth, she didn't care. Not like I thought she did. I remember the first time I saw Emily as a little girl. She was always so full of life, so full of hope. I remember her first day of school, her first recital, the first time she brought home a drawing she made for me. She would say, "Daddy, this is for you," and I would hold it up with such pride. Those were the moments that defined me as a father. Those were the moments that made me feel like I was doing something right. But now it felt like all of that was nothing. The phone calls from Emily had stopped coming regularly. She only called when she needed something, whether it was money, help with something around the house, or advice. That was all I was good for anymore. I thought back to the day she had gotten married. I had given her my best wishes and supported her completely. I thought she had a good man in Mark, someone who would stand by her just as I had always tried to do. I trusted him. I believed in their future. I still remember shaking his hand on their wedding day, telling him, "Take care of my girl." But somewhere along the way things changed. Mark had started asking for money. At first it was small requests, ones I could easily handle: emergency repairs around the house, a new washer and dryer, a new fridge. I didn't think twice about it. But soon it was more than that. There were investments, new cars, even a vacation fund. And I kept giving. I kept giving because that's what fathers do. They provide, they help, they give without asking for anything in return. At least that's what I had told myself. And then there was the mortgage. I gave them money to pay off their home, to make sure they could live comfortably. I did it for them so they could live stress-free. But they never once acknowledged how much I had sacrificed. It wasn't just the money. It was the trust one had placed in them. I believed that by helping them, I was ensuring their happiness. But now, sitting in the darkness of my car on a long road home, I realized the truth. They didn't care. I gave them everything and it was never enough. The loans, the gifts, the endless hours of my time. The one thing I wanted, the one thing I needed, was simple: recognition. But I had been given nothing but disregard, disrespect, and pain. My heart was aching, not just from the physical pressure but from the emotional weight of it all. Every breath felt like a struggle. My chest tightened as I thought back to all the years I had spent doing my best for my children, and it all felt like a distant dream now. Was it worth it? Was the sacrifice worth it if no one even noticed? I thought about Emily's words, the ones that cut so deep. I tried to block them out, but they echoed in my mind with every turn of the wheel. "I hope he crashes." She had laughed, her husband by her side, unaware of the depths of pain they were causing. The silence in the car was suffocating. I thought about pulling over, but I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to feel the weight of my own failure as a father. But I knew I couldn't run from it forever. I needed to confront this family, this life I had given everything for, and this pain I had buried deep inside. I needed to stand up for myself, to finally say enough was enough. As I drove, I thought about the only thing that mattered now: my health. I thought about the years I had left, and whether I wanted to continue living for people who would never appreciate me. What had I been doing with my life? For the first time, I felt ready to make a choice. The hours seemed to stretch endlessly. The road ahead was dark, empty, and vast, just like the void inside of me. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I fought back the wave of emotions that threatened to overtake me. I knew what I had to do. The pain, the frustration, the constant feeling of being unseen by my own flesh and blood, it was all too much to ignore anymore. I had been patient. I had been selfless. But now I was beginning to wonder if I had been a fool. As I neared Emily's house, my thoughts clouded with a mixture of anger and hurt. The vision of her laughing, her careless words, "I hope he crashes." They kept echoing in my mind, replaying over and over again like an awful soundtrack to the betrayal I was feeling. It wasn't just about the cake. It wasn't just about the birthday. It was everything. For years I had sacrificed my time, my energy, my health, and I had been willing to sacrifice even more. I had let myself become invisible in their lives, thinking that by giving, I would be able to hold on to the one thing that mattered to me: family. But now I realized something I had been blind to for too long. Family wasn't supposed to be built on sacrifices that go unappreciated. It wasn't supposed to make you feel like a ghost. I couldn't go in there anymore. Not like this. Not as a shadow, a man just showing up with a cake and hoping for some sliver of recognition. No, I needed more than that. I parked the car on the curb just short of the driveway and sat for a long time, the engine idling, the night surrounding me like a blanket of cold. My heart felt heavy, like it was being crushed under the weight of years of silence and neglect. I thought of the past, the way Emily used to look up at me with admiration, the way she used to cling to my side when she was scared. Where did that little girl go? Had she really grown into someone who could wish harm on her own father? Was this the woman I had spent my life trying to provide for? I closed my eyes and exhaled deeply, feeling the strain in my chest. My health had been deteriorating for some time now. Doctor's visits, medications, constant worry. But I had pushed all of that aside for them. For her. I had kept going even when my body was telling me to stop, because I believed that the love I gave would eventually be returned. But now I wasn't so sure. I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for people who didn't even care enough to notice. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. It was Emily standing in the doorway, dressed casually in her robe, looking like she had no idea that I had just driven nearly 9 hours to see her. She didn't even wave. She just stood there, staring at the car as if she were waiting for me to make the first move. I could see Mark in the background, his presence silent but noticeable. He didn't even come to greet me. I opened the car door slowly and stepped out, the weight of my own anger settling over me like a storm cloud. I didn't feel like a father anymore. I felt like a stranger, a man who had given up his life for people who didn't even care enough to meet him halfway. I walked up the driveway, the crunch of the gravel beneath my feet louder than usual. When I reached the porch, I stopped just in front of Emily. Her face was unreadable and I could see the guilt in her eyes, but there was no apology. There was no warmth. "Hi, Dad," she said flatly, as if nothing had happened, as if everything was fine. The words hit me like a slap in the face. That word used to mean everything to me. It used to come from her mouth with such love and respect. Now it felt hollow. Empty. "I brought you something," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I could feel the tightness in my chest, but I pressed on. "A cake. It's your birthday. I thought maybe we could celebrate." I held the cake out to her, but she didn't take it. She didn't move. I watched her eyes flick to the cake, then to me, then back to the cake again, and then she let out a sigh. I knew it. She wasn't interested. She didn't care. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "You know, I've done a lot for you, Emily. More than you'll ever know." Emily shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice suddenly defensive. I stared at her, the words I had been holding in for so long finally finding their way to the surface. "I've given you everything. All my time, all my money, all my love. And what do I get in return? A birthday cake that you don't even want. A house I helped you buy that you don't appreciate. And worst of all," my voice cracked, but I didn't stop, "you wish I would crash on the road." I heard you, Emily. I heard every word. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's face flushed and Mark stepped forward, his expression unreadable. But it didn't matter. I wasn't going to hold back anymore. "I've been more than a father to you. I've been a bank. I've been a servant. But I've never been seen by you. And I'm done. I'm done pretending that everything's fine when it's not. I'm done being your ATM." I set the cake on the porch. It felt like an anchor, heavy and final. I didn't want to stay here anymore. I didn't want to beg for love that wasn't coming. "I came all this way to give you a gift," I said, my voice now calm but firm. "But I've realized something. I'm the one who needs something. I need respect. I need to be treated like a father, not a wallet." Emily didn't speak. She didn't move. I could see the guilt in her eyes now, but I wasn't sure if it was real or just a fleeting feeling. I turned and walked back to my car, every step heavier than the last. As I climbed into the driver's seat, I didn't look back. Not once. I drove away, and for the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't sure what the future held for me, but I knew one thing. I was done sacrificing myself for a family that didn't appreciate it. I drove off into the night, the cake still sitting on the porch, a reminder that I had finally made the choice to stop giving. I didn't need to be everything for them anymore. It was time for me to start living for myself. As the miles passed beneath me, the weight of the confrontation settled deeper into my chest. The car's headlights illuminated the road ahead, but the darkness outside seemed to reflect the turmoil inside me. The drive felt endless, but strangely, it was the first time in a long time I didn't feel like I was running from something. For the first time in ages, I was heading toward something: self-respect. I kept replaying the scene in my mind, each word I had spoken. The cake, the silence, Emily's reaction. I wasn't sure what I had expected. Maybe for her to apologize, or for Mark to say something, anything, that would make me feel like they understood. But the truth was, nothing could change what had already been said. The damage had been done, and the door had been opened. I couldn't just walk back through it and pretend it hadn't happened. The hardest part of it all wasn't the anger or the betrayal. It was the realization that I had given everything, and still, it hadn't been enough. I had spent my life believing that if I just kept giving, if I kept making sacrifices, they would come to see how much I cared. I had believed that love could be earned through effort. But now I understood. It didn't work like that. I felt my heart tighten at the thought of Emily, standing there in the doorway, distant and cold. That was my daughter. The little girl who had once run into my arms, who had held my hand with such trust. How had it all slipped away? The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. I had allowed myself to become their ATM, their caregiver, the person they called when they needed something. I had played the role of the father who never asked for anything, the one who just kept giving. But I had never once asked them to see me as more than that. And now I was paying the price. I thought about the sacrifices I had made over the years. The money I had given them, the loans I had co-signed, the times I had come to their aid when they were struggling. I remembered the gifts, the expensive gifts, the vacation I had sent them on to help them reconnect. I had spent so much on their happiness, hoping they would appreciate it, but they hadn't. It was never enough. The house, the renovations, the constant stream of support, it had all been to ensure they had the life I thought they wanted. I wanted them to be comfortable, to never struggle. And yet, it was like I didn't even exist. I pulled off the highway at a rest stop and parked the car. The cool night air felt good against my skin as I stepped out, needing to stretch my legs, needing to breathe. I walked around the empty lot, my mind buzzing with 100 thoughts. I didn't know what the future held for me, but one thing was clear: I couldn't go on like this. I had to let go. Letting go wasn't just about the money or the things I had given them. It was about releasing the idea that I could change their behavior, that I could somehow fix what had been broken. I couldn't make them love me or appreciate me, or see me the way I had hoped they would. That wasn't my job anymore. I sat on a bench, my hands resting on my knees, staring out at the quiet lot. The stillness of the night settled over me, and for the first time in a long time I felt peaceful. Not content, not happy, but peaceful. Like the storm that had been brewing inside of me for years had finally passed. The next morning, as I resumed my drive, I thought about my health. I had been a heart patient for years, but I had always pushed through. I had always told myself that I couldn't afford to slow down, that they needed me. But now I realized that I needed me too. I needed to take care of myself. I needed to focus on my own well-being and stop running myself ragged trying to fix everything for everyone else. The thought of Emily still weighed heavily on my heart. I didn't know if our relationship could ever be repaired, or if I even wanted it to be. But I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't be the man I used to be anymore. The man who would give and give even when he was empty. That man had burned out. I thought back to the days when I had been strong, when I had been proud of who I was. I had been someone who made decisions with his heart, someone who believed in family above all else. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself in the process of trying to hold on to something that was no longer there. I wasn't a fool. I knew that if Emily ever came around, it wouldn't be the same. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed her to. I had to live for myself now. As the miles passed, I made a vow to myself. I was going to spend the rest of my days doing the things that brought me peace. I would go for walks in the park, read books I had forgotten about, and maybe even take that fishing trip I had always wanted. For once, I was going to put myself first. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't make Emily see me the way I had always hoped she would. But I could change how I moved forward. I could make choices that honored my own needs, my own well-being. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Not for the future of my family, but for my own future. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a chance to live my life for me. I didn't know what would come next. Maybe Emily would come to her senses one day. Maybe she wouldn't. But for now, I was done looking for validation in the people who had taken so much from me. I had given enough. It was time to give to myself. The weeks that followed my confrontation with Emily and Mark felt like a blur. I spent my days taking small steps toward the life I had put off for so long. There were still moments where the ache of the past would flare up, where memories of Emily, of the old times when we were close, would come rushing back. But it wasn't the same. The sharp pain had dulled, replaced by something calmer, more centered. Acceptance. I spent more time at the little house I'd always loved, the one that was tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, far enough from the chaos of family but close enough if I ever wanted to reach out. The silence was comforting. There were no phones ringing, no constant demands for my attention. Just the rustle of leaves outside and the occasional chirp of birds. I could finally breathe. I still hadn't heard from Emily. At first I waited. I'd been taught that family should be the ones to reach out first, that they should come to you, apologize, and make things right. But the days turned into weeks and there was still nothing. No calls, no messages, no letters. At first it stung. I had expected something, anything, to show that my words had been heard. But then I realized something that had eluded me for so long. Their silence was not a reflection of my worth. I had been conditioned to believe that if I gave enough, if I sacrificed enough, I would receive love and gratitude in return. But that had never been the case. And I needed to accept that. I could no longer tie my happiness to their actions. One morning, after I'd spent an hour reading in my chair by the window, the phone rang. I picked it up without hesitation, my heart racing slightly. I was sure it would be the usual calls from my financial advisor or some automated message, but when I heard the voice on the other end, I froze. "Hi, Dad. It's Emily." Her voice was quieter than usual, but there was a noticeable softness in it. The tone was different, almost like she was unsure of how to proceed. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for whatever was to come. It wasn't going to be easy. "Hi, Emily," I said, my voice steady but guarded. "It's good to hear from you." I know I haven't reached out and I'm sorry for that," she said, and there was a pause before she continued. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said and I know I've hurt you. I've been really selfish and I didn't realize how much that would affect you." My chest tightened as I listened. For a moment I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to hearing her talk like this. Like she understood the weight of her actions, like she was finally taking responsibility for the hurt she had caused. I had spent so long wanting this, wanting her to recognize my pain, to see me. But now that she was saying it, I wasn't sure how to react. "I don't know what to say, Emily," I said, my voice catching slightly. "I've spent a long time trying to make things right, to give everything I had. But I couldn't keep doing it, not if it meant losing myself in the process." "I get it now," she replied softly. "And I'm sorry for everything. I know I've taken you for granted and I don't want that to be how we end up. I want to try to fix things, if you'll let me." The words hit me hard and for a moment I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to shout at her, to say everything I had kept bottled up for all these years. Another part of me wanted to forgive her instantly, to pretend that everything could just go back to the way it was. But that wasn't real. It couldn't be. "You're right," I said slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. "But it's going to take time, Emily. I can't just forget everything that's happened. You've hurt me deeply and I can't just brush that aside. I need to take care of myself now. I can't keep giving everything to you if I don't take care of me." "I understand, Dad," she said quietly. I wanted you to know that I see you now. I see everything you've done. And I don't take it for granted anymore. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I promise. There was a long silence, and I realized that I wasn't sure where this conversation was going to take us. But that was okay. For the first time in years, I wasn't focused on forcing things back to where they used to be. I was focusing on myself, on healing. I'm glad you called, I said finally. I don't know what will happen from here, but we'll take it one step at a time. Thank you, Dad, she replied, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. I love you. I love you too, Emily, I said, and this time I meant it. Not with the weight of obligation, but with the quiet understanding that love is not always perfect. But it can still be real. We hung up and I sat back in my chair, feeling a strange mix of emotions. I wasn't sure what the future held for me and my family. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. Maybe things wouldn't ever go back to how they were. Maybe I would never fully regain the relationship I had once hoped for. But I knew one thing for sure. I had learned to stop looking for approval from others. I had learned to live for myself. And that, in itself, was a victory. As the sun set that evening, I stood by the window watching the colors of the sky shift and change. There was a calmness to the moment, a quiet satisfaction. I had given everything I could, and now it was time for me to live the rest of my life in a way that honored myself. For the first time in years, I felt free. And that freedom was the greatest gift I could have ever given myself. Looking back, I've learned a hard but valuable lesson. Love can't be bought. I spent years being the one everyone turned to, always giving money, gifts, and support, hoping for love in return. But I was wrong. I can't change the past, and I can't force people to value me the way I wanted. The turning point came when Emily called, apologizing for everything. It was the first time I felt truly seen, not for what I could give, but for who I was. It was a wake-up call. I don't need their approval. I stopped trying to be their ATM, and instead I focused on myself for once. It wasn't easy, but I finally learned that taking care of myself is the best gift I can give. I don't know what the future holds with my family, but I'm at peace now. I've learned that my happiness matters, and I'm moving forward with that in mind. If you're in a similar place, just know, it's okay to stop giving and start living for yourself. You deserve that.